Hey guys, if you've dialed in already, we're just going to give people a few moments to join us. Thanks for dialing in. Numbers shooting up as I look.
So you might want to put your camera back a little bit. I can see your forehead.
Camera back.
There we go. Cheers, man.
Oh, let's go check.
Yeah, excited to dive into backend today. Hopefully got a few people sticking around from the previous ones if they want to get their Hackathon Wine Club as well. But yeah, it should be an interesting chat today, going through the backend stuff.
Yeah, looking forward to. Yeah, it's been interesting on the Zoom meetings and such. People that you can see more of their ceiling than you can actually see of their face or what they're saying. So
yeah, exactly.
Try to avoid that. Hope your angles up. Okay, numbers still coming in.
Oh, cool. Lovely. And yeah, I think one thing to say is thank you very much to everyone who's responded. I know all of us, I think Darren, you've shared a few, Dale, you mentioned a few, I think Mark as well, and myself, all had some lovely messages about Monday and yesterday's training sessions. So really, really nice to know that that is something that people are appreciating. People are getting some good value out of it, finding it quite engaging. So yeah, we'll try and keep that up through today's session. Long may it continue.
Absolutely. So just a 1 minute 12.
Cool.
People still joining.
Yeah, I think previous days we've hung on about 2 or 3 minutes past just to make sure we've got everyone on. I think people are joining for kind of 12 on the dot. Cool.
I've put something in the chat, but essentially if people have questions on anything regarding content that's coming out or anything like that, feel free to shoot it onto the chat and then Q&A. So anything for Sylvia that we're introducing in a couple of minutes plus Phil or Dale or myself, please put them in the Q&A and we will we'll endeavour to answer as many as we can.
I think it's all great work experience for our future careers in radio, I think, maybe, or
yeah, exactly.
Mark's definitely got the voice for radio out of all of us.
Yes, I definitely need a better voice, but I'm stick with this one.
I think someone complimented and said I had the face for radio, so I'm going to stick with that one. So. So guys, if you're just still dialing in, we're going to give people a few more minutes to get dialed in and set up with their lunches or their coffees and biscuits, however it may be. Just bear with us. We'll give people another minute or two just to dial in so everyone's on the same page at the start of the presentation.
And if people want to start, if people had a few questions they wanted answering on backend before even coming in today, feel free to shoot them into Q&A now. And then I'll make sure that we, if they're not topics we're going to cover, I'll make sure that they're in here somewhere.
Yeah, and I hope you guys noticed yesterday that I think the quiz went up a step in terms of difficulty. I think the Monday's quiz was relatively easy. Even I gave up on the test after I got a couple wrong. So yeah, really important to be taking notes probably through this presentation or watch the replay on YouTube later if you want to get those scores in. 2 minutes past, how are we doing?
Numbers are still going up, but I think we can probably do the intro part at least.
Yeah, okay. So guys, we are going to kick off. So thanks for joining day 3 of the Hackathon Tech Recruitment Training Session. So we're running these all of this week and 4 days next week up until the bank holiday, which this year is on the Friday. So today we're going to be talking about back-end development, so doing a bit more of a deep dive. So in Monday's session, we covered this very briefly, and Phil and Darren guided us through that. The guys were running the sessions yesterday, so delighted to say that Phil and Darren are with us again today. So I'll do quick introductions for the team. So I'm Dale, I'm head of product at Hackathon, and I'll be your host for today, taking over from Mark, who's I think earned a well-earned rest from running these sessions every day. So Phil is going to be leading the session today, talking through we're going to touch on 6 different backend languages today, and Phil's going to guide us through that content. And we are delighted today to be joined with a real special treat. We have Silvio, who is one of HackerJob's own backend developers, specializing in PHP, also Node.js, which is coded in JavaScript, and has recently deployed some very exciting projects in Golang, which is a brand new language. So really, really great person to ask your questions. If you want to ask your really technical questions, I think today's is a really great opportunity to do that. But as I say, we're going to run through the content briefly, but I'll just skip on to some housekeeping. So I think Darren has mentioned already, if you want to get your comments or questions, please use either the comments or the Q&A function on Zoom. Just requested, if you can make them visible to all participants, you've got 2 options about who to make them visible to. That means people won't keep on asking the same questions over and over again, so it'll make it us easier to get to find your question. Every day we're sending out a new invite. We can't do recurring webinars, I don't think, in Zoom at the moment. So if for any reason you're not getting that link and need to get in tomorrow, then just email hello@HackerJob. I think Daisy is manning that and looking after us there. Poll results. So we've set up a poll yesterday asking if you guys would like to have a Slack group to support more of the questions and sort of discovery of the information. We've got overwhelmingly resounding positive feedback on that, so that will be coming soon. I'm reliably informed that someone very capable is going to be looking after that. And finally, if you've got friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from this, they can catch up. So we've put these yesterday's and Monday sessions onto a YouTube series. I think the link's going to be put in the chat very shortly, so you can get to that. And in a moment, we'll also be sharing the quiz. Just the other people on the call, we've got Darren, I think, who's going to be monitoring our Q&A today, and also our erstwhile moderator, Daisy, who's been pulling all the strings for us today. So thanks to all the guys who have worked incredibly hard to get this content ready for you. Just a reminder, points mean prizes. So as we're referring to earlier, there's a £500 Amazon voucher to be won for whoever scores the most out of the quizzes. The link for today's quiz will be going into the chat very shortly. And also anyone that attends 6 out of our 9 sessions over the next 2 weeks will automatically get invited to the HackerJob Wine Club. I'll just remind you, the Wine Club is, you'll get sent a few bottles of wine to drink at home, and also an invitation to join us on a Zoom chat where a qualified and highly skilled sommelier, so wine expert, will be talking you through the different wines and the flavours you can expect to see there. I think, as we're all in UK currently in lockdown, a really great way to socialise with people and also enjoy some delicious wine as well. So I'm duty bound to try and move this swiftly on. So just a reminder, we're on day 3 out of 9. Here's the agenda. So today we're dealing with backend development. Tomorrow we'll be looking to testing and databases, and then Friday wrapping up the week with modern software engineering. Structure today, as mentioned, we're going about 30 to 40 minutes looking through those 6 different languages, and Phil's going to ably guide us through that. And we've also got our expert software engineer today, so to do the developer Q&A. So get your questions into Q&A as we go. You can ask questions at any point. Phil's also going to give us some recruitment insights, and also a couple of sort of case studies or recruiter challenges, so scenarios that recruiters might be facing in their day-to-day jobs. If you've got some of those, some challenges you're dealing with at the moment, again, put them in the comments or the Q&A, and we might be able to come to those in due course. And just a reminder, ask questions throughout. Any questions we're not able to get to in the session, we'll try and get emailed out as part of the follow-up. And again, the deck, so the slides and all the video will be available to consume after the session as well. So don't panic if you miss anything. So I think we've done intros to the team. So I think without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Phil, who's going to take over most of the session today. Thank you, Phil.
Lovely. Cheers, Dale. So yeah, we'll do a quick overview of what backend development is. I know you guys have probably heard this 3 times now, but I think it's worth a very, very quick refresher each time. We'll then kind of dive into the main languages or the main backend languages that are in use presently. Obviously, there are a lot of legacy languages that you'll see as well, but these are kind of the core 6 that companies are mainly using in a commercial sense at the moment. And again, there's some more modern languages that are starting to come in, but we'll touch on those on Friday, talk you through some recruiter insights, and obviously go through those kind of challenges that we've sourced from you guys in terms of what you're facing in terms of your day-to-day challenges with recruiting for these roles. Cool. Yeah, please skip on.
Yeah. Great, Phil. Thanks for that.
Lovely. Yeah, if we just jump to the next slide, please.
Oh, and again.
Cool. So what is backend development? So as we've touched on, it's the logic of an application. To use that analogy that we've thrown around quite a lot, if the front end is the face, the back end is the brain, with the database obviously being the memory. So the back end takes a request from the user. So the user clicks on the front end. The backend then retrieves the information from the database and provides a response back to the user. So it does the thinking. It is, you know, it's the logic of the application. Types of traditional backend applications would be web, desktop, mobile, and embedded. Today we'll focus mainly on web and desktop. To be honest, web is the main focus actually of the day. We'll touch on desktop very slightly. As I've mentioned a few times, web development is the most popular form of development at the moment, just down to the fact that every company has a website, every company is digitally transforming, every company wants as much of their content and transactions to be online. So obviously web development with that in mind is very popular. However, we will touch on desktop applications, and then we'll have some sessions either next week, or no, sorry, the week after next, that can touch on kind of mobile and what embedded systems are and embedded software is. But you will see some references to those throughout this presentation today. Great. Next, lovely. So in terms of the format that I'm going to introduce these languages to you, it's useful for me to just talk you through how I'm going to be pitching all of these in. So we'll discuss the version of each language. So all languages have a version history, as new versions are released regularly, which update the functionality. So as with anything, as with, you know, Microsoft going from XP to Vista and all of these, as with PlayStation going from PS1 to PS4, when you've got a development language, you want to be constantly adding to it, constantly making sure that it keeps up with modern improvements and that you can get the best functionality from it. So new versions with new syntax, so essentially new ways of saying things, are released all of the time. We have obviously frameworks as well. We've touched on those a few times. They're libraries of pre-existing code, which can be used to streamline your development process. Unit testing tools, so tools that are used by developers to unit test their code, and then a bit of additional information, just anything we feel is relevant, when you're searching for this particular type of developer. And then I'll also talk you through a few red flags, kind of what not to look for if you're looking for a Java web developer, for example. Cool.
Great, Phil. So bringing on our first one, so Java.
Yeah, so Java is one of the most popular programming languages used to create web applications and platforms. It was designed for flexibility, allowing developers to write code that would run on any machine, regardless of architecture or platform. So really flexible. Sylvie, did you have anything to add on this?
Yes, a short introduction. I prepared a set of proverbs, one line for each language. So this will be my intervention in this. So for Java, I have this: write once, run everywhere, but be patient.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think that sums it up very well. So it's very flexible. You can use it in various different forms. It talks or reacts very nicely with other technologies because it's open source. So that's why it's very widely used. But as Sylvia's touched on there, it's not the quickest, which can mean that it's not necessarily the best choice for your company, but it does give you lots of flexibility.
Fantastic. So we're getting philosophy as well as tech insight today. Double the value for your money, guys.
Great. So when you're looking for a Java web developer, what to look out for? So in terms of the version, so 14 is actually the most modern, but you will not see that in commercial use. It was released last month, so no companies are on board with that yet. To be honest, really, 10 is probably the most advanced we really see used commercially at the moment, just because it takes a long time to onboard new versions of languages. But anything 8 and above is considered modern. So anything 7 and below, probably not going to be the best fit for your company if you're using the modern version of Java. Spring is by far the most sought after framework on the market within Java, particularly Spring Boot, as that is used to build out microservices, which again is something we'll touch on Friday. Testing tools, you're looking at JUnit. And then in terms of additional information that can kind of really make a developer stand out, anyone who's touched on kind of microservices, has DevOps or cloud knowledge, any big data knowledge, or kind of advanced databases knowledge is kind of ahead of the curve when it comes to Java development. Darren, I don't know if you had anything to add on that?
No, nothing in particular.
Lovely.
I think you've covered it quite well.
Excellent. And then
red flag. Sorry, go on, Phil. I was just going to say, a lot of these technologies might seem like keywords to some of the audience right now. I think really important to stress that we'll be doing deep dives into some of these technologies either this week or next week. So yeah, you'll start to really understand how these different technologies mean what they mean and how they interact with each other.
Absolutely. It's worth having it here so that when you've got the full picture at the end of the 2 weeks, you can then piece it all together and you can kind of join all the dots together. So in terms of the red flags, so older frameworks you'll see are kind of JEE or J2EE, so that's Enterprise Edition, just a little bit dated. Hibernate, Swing, and Struts. Hibernate's the most modern of those, but realistically, the majority of companies we're seeing at the moment that are hiring in Java, Spring is what they're looking for. You'll see a lot of Java mobile developers, so Android SDK. Basically anyone using Android SDK will be coding in Java. Doesn't necessarily mean they're a Java web developer. In terms of the responsibilities, and you'll see this on every slide, so I'm not going to explain this every time, but anyone who's primarily working on kind of fixes, monitoring tickets, or in a support function probably hasn't worked on the more complex projects that you're looking for. And then we touched on this yesterday, but just to reiterate, Java and JavaScript are not related. I think Mark used the explanation that they're as related as car and carpet are. So yeah, that's a little summary of Java.
Great, thanks, Phil. So I think the famous Java versus JavaScript will probably be the header on every single slide until the end of this series. Yeah. But thanks, great summary on Java. So next up, we've got C#.
Great. So C# can be used to create almost anything, but it's particularly strong at building Windows desktop applications and games. So C# was actually created by Microsoft originally as a closed source, so you had to license it to use it. Recently with .NET Core, they have opened up to be more open source. C# can also be used to develop web applications and has become increasingly popular for mobile development too. So as with Java, quite a versatile language. Sylvie?
Yes, you can build almost anything, but you're stuck with the Windows platform.
Yeah.
And this is a big con for this.
Absolutely. So if you're wanting to use kind of Linux or Unix or other operating systems, you're very much tied to Windows and a lot of the Windows associated technologies.
There are solutions for Linux, but they are very limited. So the Windows is a recommendation.
Lovely. Thanks, Sylvia. Excellent. Have we got any questions so far, Darren, that you want me to jump on, or?
No questions in particular. A lot of them, we can kind of do one on C# now, actually. It's literally just come in. Is C# still a popular language among developers in 2020?
Yeah, so .NET Core certainly is. I think we'll go through this in a second anyway. I think it did start to fade a little bit. I think just because they were so kind of dogmatic and associating everything with Windows technologies. But I think .NET Core has done a hell of a lot for C#. It was a long time coming that they would open up to it to be more open source, which means that obviously you don't have to license it, other people can add to it. So I think that has been huge in kind of bouncing C# back into relevance.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that point. I think that C# now it's gone open source seems to be a lot more prevalent. We tend to see it at least within our own client base, mainly at the enterprise level. Rather than other languages like Python and Java and Node tend to be at that scale up level a lot more. So, but I think that's the nature of it being in the MS products.
Yeah, absolutely. So with C Sharp, 8 is the most recent version. To be honest, unlike Java, where you do have quite a strict specification that a lot of companies want Java 8 and above, because there was a big shift between 7 and 8. You don't hear too much about C Sharp version. Obviously, if someone's working with a very, very early version, 1 or 2, then maybe you want to kind of question how comfortable they are with the more up-to-date syntax, but it's not something that people tend to mention to us anyway. We find .NET Core is very much the sought-after tool on the market, although we are still seeing quite a lot of companies that are open to ASP.NET developers. The main testing tool is NUnit, and again, exactly the same as Java. The same kind of additional desirable knowledge stands out. They're very similar in terms of their syntax, actually. They're very similar in terms of their flexibility and what you can do. Java's just had that edge of being open source for a lot longer. In terms of red flags, so we've got older frameworks like VB.NET. There are other ones, but VB.NET is probably the most common one you'll still see on CVs. You've got desktop frameworks like WinForms and WPF. So if you're looking for C# web, that's not necessarily what you're looking for. You have mobile development frameworks, exactly the same as you do with Java and Android SDK, in that you can use C# or Xamarin for mobile projects. So again, they might not be the right person for you. And again, those responsibilities. So you just want to make sure that they've been working on complex projects and not just kind of supporting and working on tickets and fixes.
Great, thanks, Phil. So that was C#. Moving on now to Python.
Before we move on from C#, someone's highlighted that ASP.NET isn't mentioned in your slide.
I
don't know if we want to.
So ASP.NET's here on the framework section. I'm not sure if.
Oh, sorry, I missed that too. Apologies.
Yeah. So as I said, .NET Core is the most up to date. It's the open source one, but I did touch on that. ASP.NET is still something we see companies hire for. They are still open to it. It's just .NET Core is by far the preference.
Makes sense.
Cool, thanks. Really, really thorough run through there, Phil. Thank you. Thanks for keeping us on our toes, Darren. So moving on to Python, a increasingly popular language, I understand, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as we see here, Python's a general purpose programming language. Hence, you can use the programming language for developing both desktop and web applications, but you can also use it for developing complex scientific and numeric applications, and it's designed with features to facilitate data analysis and visualization. So super popular on the market. I think when you look at developer surveys, it is the most popular language in use, but that's primarily because it's got so many different functions to it. So when you're looking at Python web development, it's not the most popular. When you're looking at the usage of Python across the whole, then yes, it is. Silvio, I don't know if you had anything to add on that?
Yes, it's some kind of a joke. If you want to make your machine learn something, Python will do the work for you, but you'll have to wait. Again, you have to be patient because it's not the fastest language out there because it's interpreted.
Yeah, and I think, is that associated with the uses of Python within kind of machine learning and the fact that it's good when it comes to AI?
Yes, these days machine learning is in high demand, so Python is the best candidate for this job because it has a lot of libraries, especially built for machine learning and AI.
Yeah, absolutely. So similarities between all the first three we've discussed. They're all really, they're all very flexible. They've all got a lot of functionality to them. Just sometimes not the quickest to use, and in C#'s case, sometimes a little bit restrictive if you're using non-open source versions of it. Cool.
Excellent. And associated with two of the most exciting terms in software development and data science is that AI, so artificial intelligence and machine learning, things that lots of companies are trying to develop capabilities for now. Absolutely, and definitely something we'll be touching on in future as well.
So again, with Python, the most up-to-date version is 3.7. It's similar to C#. It's not necessarily version that we're asked to source for. Normally, it's more framework-based. So Java is really the only one where we do hear specifications in terms of version, which is 8 and above. So the two main frameworks for Python web development are Django and Flask. And in terms of testing, the most popular tool is PyTest, but there are a lot of different Python testing tools you can use. And exactly the same. So with these first three, as I said, there are a lot of similarities. Microservices, DevOps knowledge, big data knowledge or data engineering knowledge, and complex database knowledge is always sought after when you're looking at back-end web developers, just because all four of those areas really contribute to your skill set. The red flags we'd be looking at here would be data-focused Python guys. So as we mentioned, Python's very good at creating numeric and kind of data-focused applications. So if you see SciPy or NumPy, or you're seeing kind of job titles that are data engineer with Python, yes, they will be, you know, confident in the basic Python syntax, but they're not going to have that web development knowledge. Obviously, if you're looking for data engineers, then great. Go for SciPy and NumPy, but we'll touch on that in a future session. You might also notice DevOps engineers that have a lot of Python on their CV as well. They'll be using it for scripting, which is a very, very basic version of Python. So again, wouldn't be right for your web development role. And then once again, we've got those red flags in terms of responsibilities.
Got it. Thanks, Phil. So the context of the overall role, sounds like it's really important about distinguishing the role of Python and how it's being used in the different skill sets of candidates.
Absolutely. You want to make sure they're working on web projects if you're looking for Python web engineers, 100%.
Fantastic. I'll pause a second in case Darren's going to jump in with any questions, but next
So I think it's kind of, it's less relevant to Python, although Python I particularly see as a language that comes out from a people with CS kind of background when coming out of university. But the question was, what language would you recommend for beginners to try and pick up to understand the core fundamentals?
This might be one for Silvio. So Silvio,
Silvio, you've walked this path. So for someone starting in web development or trying to become a software engineer, what's a good language to start with?
So there are two ways of doing this: the easy way and the hardest, the hard way. The easy way should be PHP, because it's very easy to learn, but it's a very flexible language. So if this is your first language, I recommend a more strict language like Java or even C++, which is actually used in universities for teaching. C also. So despite the fact that I'm a PHP developer, for the first language, if you want to learn it right, you should start from a more strict language, and then come to a more flexible language, because you will learn the basics.
Yeah,
cool. So go on. Yeah, so just so we're really clear for the guys listening, give two choices of the language they're going to be easiest to start with.
The easiest way is definitely PHP, but
so I think
so basically PHP, Java, or C++, right?
Yes, and PHP copied a lot from the Java structure as a language, so they can be similar in some areas.
Super. We maybe follow up in a little bit more detail and point the guys to some resources they can read up on if there are guys on the call that are interested to start their journey in web development, for sure. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to move us along, if that's okay, guys. So we've just mentioned it, PHP.
Yeah. So PHP is a general purpose language, mainly used for web development, where it excels. PHP stands for Hypertext Preprocessor. That earlier stood for personal home pages. PHP scripts can only be interpreted on a server that has PHP installed. So I think, as Silvio just touched on, very easy language to learn, but because of its flexibility, you probably want to be able to apply a bit of experience to it in terms of working out how to use it best. Whereas I think what he was getting at there with C++ and Java, because they're a lot more structured, there is a little bit more of a right way and a wrong way to do things. So I think that's, when you are starting out, although the PHP syntax might be easier to learn, the kind of rules that come along with C++ and Java might keep you on the right track. Sylvie, did you have anything else to add on PHP?
Yes, also a proverb. It's easy to build things, but try not to go too big.
Excellent. And why would that be, do you think?
Because for large scale projects, I personally do not recommend only PHP or PHP because you could face some problems in this area. So you need a more suited language for this. But you can develop, if you like, you can use PHP for large for more complex projects. But I don't think in many cases it will be the right choice.
Great. So it's good for smaller projects, maybe good for kind of
medium, maybe, yes.
Excellent. Cool. So now we're on to PHP. So as always, the most recent version is 8. Again, it's not necessarily something you do hear from clients in terms of requesting certain versions. Again, it's very framework heavy when it comes to the briefs that we get from clients. So typically at the moment, clients are mainly looking for either Symfony or Laravel, Symfony being the slightly rarer of the two. But yeah, they're the main frameworks that we're looking for at the moment. I think Symfony was actually built from Laravel. In terms of testing, we're looking at PHP unit in particular, but there are, again, lots of other testing tools that you can use for different functions. And then additional desirable knowledge. So Zend and Falcon are two less well-known PHP frameworks, but they are still sought after in the market. And then, as always, we have that microservices, DevOps, data, and database knowledge. Red flags within PHP would be CMS development. So primarily WordPress developers. You'll see a lot of WordPress developers that do touch on PHP as well. It's different to actual PHP web development though, so that while you can transition, there is a transition period and there is an upskilling period. Front end and back end skill sets within PHP. So what I mean by this is you do get a lot of crossover between PHP web developers that are also using JavaScript and are kind of more front-end developers. So if you're looking for a back-end PHP developer, just have a look at their responsibilities, not just their tech stack. Have a chat to them and find out where their responsibilities lie, and are they more front-end focused or more back-end focused. It's definitely something that crops up a little bit more with PHP than it perhaps does with other languages like Java or C#. And then, as always, those responsibilities are key, just making sure that they're working on complex projects.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Phil. And so probably the curveball in this series is Node.js.
Yeah, absolutely. So Node.js is a platform built on Chrome's JavaScript runtime for easily building fast and scalable network applications. Node.js uses event-driven, non-blocking I/O model that makes it lightweight and efficient, perfect for data-intensive real-time applications that run across distributed services. So we had a chat about these yesterday. I think Darren mentioned Slack and a few other data-intensive real-time applications that it's used for. So anything where a lot of information has to be passed on very quickly, Node.js is very, very useful for. Sylvia, was there anything you wanted to add on this?
Yes, it's fast, but don't give it heavy tasks.
Okay, and why would that be?
Because of this single-threaded model. If you are giving it a very complex CPU task, this will cause a latency in your system. So you'll have to wait. So not so real time.
Absolutely. And Sylvia's touched on a concept there that we will pick up in future. So he mentioned single-threaded. So multi-threading is another kind of buzzword you'll hear thrown around, which essentially, as Sylvia was saying there, because it's single-threaded, if you give it too much to do, it's essentially got one single thread to work along. Multi-threaded means that there are multiple channels that it can kind of work through. So while it's very, very quick, in terms of, let's say, Slack, so, sending those messages very quickly and things like that, if you're talking about it sending vast amounts of data quickly, then it can get kind of blocked up, which would be obviously a downturn.
Just to go back on a previous slide, and I think this is a very valid question. In the PHP section, we spoke about how PHP was better suited for smaller projects than larger projects. What we obviously went through why Node in particular is better suited for one task or another. Why would we say that with PHP? Why do we find it more with scale up and startup companies than with large enterprises?
So I think Sylvie touched on that already a little bit. Just in the fact that it is in terms of the load that it can bear, it's better for smaller projects. So if you're looking like a single page application,
smaller to medium projects, medium-sized projects are okay. Even larger, but for very large projects, you will need a more mature language on this area. So this is just a recommendation, because Facebook started with PHP, but after getting so big, they changed PHP. They started their own language based on PHP. So it's a clear example of the limitations of this language.
Makes sense. Great.
Okay, thanks guys. Really insightful. So I think we're going to touch upon some more of these that we're up to. Phil, yeah.
Yeah, lovely. So again, Node.js, most recent version is 13. Again, it's not necessarily sought after. It's worth people being aware, just so when you're looking at a Node developer's CV, you know, you're aware whether they are using an up-to-date version or an older version. But again, it's not necessarily something that we see really kind of sought after. Express.js is the most common framework used within Node.js, and you've got some testing tools like Mqtt, Jest. But again, there are other tools on the market. These are probably the most common ones that we'll see. And again, that same additional desirable knowledge that is desirable for almost any backend developer out there, I would say. With Node, to be honest, you're looking at the projects they've been working on. Like Node itself is quite a relatively new technology, relatively complex language to use. So if you are using Node in a complex way, you're building something that's maybe, or you see a developer that's building something that's maybe similar to what you're doing, then I think it's definitely worth you kind of having a chat with them. There's not as many kind of buzzwords that you're looking for on CVs. It's more about what that person has been using Node for. And that's where we come on to the next section. So if they've been using Node for front end, which is using compilers, so I think we touched on these yesterday. So NPM, so that's Node Package Manager, Grunt, Webpack. There's a few other tools that can give you a clue that they might actually be using Node.js to compile that code into JavaScript. So they're actually using it for front-end, well, for front-end purposes to an extent. Again, front-end or back-end skill sets, very important to kind of look at your Node developer and work out, is this a front-end developer that's using a bit of Node? Or is this a back-end developer that knows a little bit of JavaScript or is using a little bit of JavaScript? So make sure you understand which way their responsibilities and their knowledge is weighted. If you need a pure back-end Node developer, there will be a lot of front-end developers out there with Node.js on their CV that aren't necessarily right for your particular role. And as always, those same responsibilities apply.
Great. So maybe what are maybe some quick tricks for the guys on that are dialing in today? How can they distinguish quickly between a candidate that's got Node.js skills that is maybe a front end or a back end? What are the things to look for?
Yeah, good point. So I think typically these days, most front end developers that are using JavaScript heavily will be using a lot of React or a lot of Angular. So if you're seeing front end frameworks on there, and if you go back to the presentation we did yesterday, if you're seeing a lot of those tools that we talked you through yesterday, so front-end frameworks, front-end testing tools on there, that can be one clue. In terms of the responsibilities as well, are they talking about working on the user interface? Are they talking about working on the front end of the project, or are they talking more about the back end? So I think between looking at the tech stack and the responsibilities, you should get an idea. But beyond that, it's about jumping on a call with them and asking the questions, right? That's how we all learn. That's how we all get a better understanding of tech. That's how we all understand whether someone's right for the role. So just jump on a call and ask them, okay, great. I see you've been using Node.js for the last 4 years. Can you talk me through the sorts of projects you've worked on? What sort of responsibilities did you have? And just make sure that they were using that in a primarily back-end capacity.
Excellent. And I think we then using, I think the skills that are common to most recruitment roles are asking those open questions and teasing out those bits of detail are really important in that area. Just going back to the PHP question, just clarify when we talked about small to medium versus large projects. I'm assuming that means it's not reflective necessarily of the size of the organisation, but the size and the complexity of the application they're building. Is that fair?
Yes, the size exactly. I was talking about the size of the project, the complexity of the project. So we have three scales. So it's small, medium, or large. Where large can be compared to Facebook, as I said before in my example. So this is the ultimate level. So PHP could face this challenge, but I don't think it will face it for long. So you need to consider or changing the language, or maybe adding more languages, because there is not such thing as a universal language in your application. Even here at HackerJob, we have multiple languages, and we are using PHP and Node.js and Golang, all of them. Every language has its strong part. So you should mix them, not use a single one, because there is no such thing as a global do-it-all language.
Great.
Yeah, cheers, Cyril. Thanks for the clarification. So, final one of the series today. So C++. Phil, talk us through this.
Yeah, of course. So C++ allows you to have a lot of control as to how you use your computer resources. So on the right hand, it's speed and ability to cheaply use resources. It should be able to surpass other languages. Thanks to C++'s performance, it's often used to develop game engines, games, and desktop apps. Sylvie?
Yes, I have a nice one for this. With great powers comes great responsibility, and I think it's the perfect one-liner for C++.
Great.
Excellent. A profound one to
yes.
end the series on.
But it is so true when we are talking about C++.
Yeah.
Cool. So Phil, talk us through some of the details here that we want to look at for candidates.
Yeah, 100%. So with C++, again, it's another one where you really need to work out what are you looking for? What type of project are they working on? What type of C++ engineer are you looking for? Because there's various different types out there on the market. Just because they're using C++ in one capacity does not mean that it'll work for your business. So you need to make sure that you're sure how they're using it. So within kind of backend development, primarily embedded, you'll see most of these things I'm going to discuss with you at the top. So the most recent version on the market right now is C++ 17, so released in 2017, but C++ 20 is coming out this year. Within the frameworks, you'll see STL, so standard template library, Qt, and Boost. To be honest, we don't hear too much demand for the actual frameworks themselves. People are more, again, looking at the application. So how have they used C++? You'll see testing tools like CPP unit. And then again, it depends what you're looking for here. So in some instances, you might be looking for embedded as a kind of keyword, or embedded software, embedded tools. So that you want to do a little bit of research around kind of the embedded software that you're currently using. I know Mqtt, which is a message queuing system, again, which we'll come on to on Friday. It's very sought after within C++ at the moment. And it can be used for graphical user interfaces. So as Darren touched on yesterday, if that is what you're looking for, if you're looking for a C++ developer that can contribute to your interface, then looking for technologies around GUIs, so graphic user interfaces, could be very useful to you. Obviously, these red flags are red flags if this isn't the type of developer you're looking for. If you're looking for a game developer with C++, that's certainly not a red flag. If you are looking for a back-end embedded kind of C++ developer, though, then things to look out for are game developers, very, very heavily used within game development. It can be used for animation as well, so make sure that it isn't an animator that's using C++ to create some amazing animations. It can be used in web browser development, so actually developing the browser itself rather than the browser-based applications. And again, those responsibilities, as always, are something to kind of bear in mind.
Cool. So again, similar to either Node.js or Python, the context of the role is really important about the application of this skill set.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Fantastic. So Darren, any questions that have come burning through since we last checked in with you?
A general question. Why are some languages better for scaling than others? It kind of goes back to a previous point, but it's interesting when we get to C++ because there's been comments in the chat about C++ is a little bit low in supply, or it's quite complex finding people with that skill set. So I guess when we're talking about scaling plus how we find these people, it'd be interesting to get you guys' thoughts.
So I'm not sure I fully understand the question. So why is C++, or why are certain languages scalable? Or...
Yeah, exactly. Why are certain languages scalable? And then there's I guess a follow-up question I can ask afterwards.
Okay, cool. Silvio, I'm not sure if you want to take this one.
The first thing that comes into my mind it's multi-threading, because for scaling you definitely need this. And if the question is again regarded to PHP,
Yeah.
PHP is single-threaded, and that's all about. That's a big thing about its limitations.
Yep.
So you definitely need multi-threading for scaling.
And multi-threading
yes.
You guys, Sylvie.
Because how PHP is working is okay. The user make a request, the server starts a process and respond, and it's a process for each request. And in case of a lot of traffic, you could effectively lock the server, so it cannot handle concurrent requests in the same process. So it's the process is, if I want to explain it more high level, the process is the first child of the primary relative of the CPU. So it costs a lot in terms of resources. The thread is like a child to the process. So multi-threading is definitely better for scaling. But this not necessarily implies that PHP cannot use for scaling. You could build distributing on several servers or things like this, but not very, very complex project. Again, it has its limitations.
Right, and multi-threading is something we'll touch on later. I think Java is a good example of a language that does support multi-threading very well. I know within Java, particularly when I used to kind of recruit for it, multi-threading was something that companies were very focused on. So that probably is what is a big distinction between maybe Java and other enterprise or heavily used enterprise languages, and your kind of Node.js, PHP, things like that, which tend to be used more on smaller projects or smaller scale businesses.
Oh, great questions. They're really challenging the guy with some really technical questions today. So thanks for those. We'll move on, I think, then. So we've prepared some more questions for Silvio, which I think Darren's going to walk us through, or possibly we've got some more questions from the Q&A. Darren, over to you.
Cool. So why don't we go through these, and then, because I think a lot of the questions that are in the Q&A at the moment, I will make sure that we cover on the Friday webinar when it comes to scaling. I'll make sure that we've got a section on that, because I think it's really interesting questions. So Sylvia, so what's the most important thing for you when choosing a company to work for?
When I'm choosing a company, first I look at the stack, the technology stack, and second I Google the company and search for its reputation and for its culture, because it's one of the most important things when you are choosing your next job. Makes sense.
And do you take into consideration, because you say you Googled, so do you take into consideration stuff like Glassdoor and those kind of sites?
Yes, Glassdoor is one of my one of the most important sources for me. So yes, and I'm sure Google will highlight the result.
Yeah.
Anyway,
makes sense. So the next question is there anything you look for on a job specification which makes a company stand out?
Yes, first I look at, I read the job specs because I read and I want to see if they are copied from the internet, because it's a wide practice, or the company took the time to write its own specs more accurately. And second, I'm looking for openness to new technologies, and I'm seeking their intention to offer me as a developer the opportunity to learn new things and to have a clear career path, because maybe someone needs wants to set up their path from the beginning, from the first day they enter the company. So for some developers, this is very important, not only the technology stack.
Makes sense. And these are kind of 2-in-1 questions here, but what's your favorite language to use and why? And then I guess as a follow-up, what would you want to learn next?
Okay, like I said, my first love when it comes to programming languages is definitely PHP. But I never liked monogamy when it comes to programming. So over the time, I flirted with more languages, and I will definitely do it in the future with other languages. Currently, I'm learning Golang, which is extraordinary languages, and scales very well. And in the future, I would like to try Rust, which is similar, but I heard and I read something about it that is more, it's faster than Go. So it made me curious.
Great. Just to touch on that, so on Friday we will be discussing Go and Rust in more detail therein with our modern software engineering.
Makes sense. And then what do you think is the most important skill set for a backend developer? Like, what makes a good backend developer?
Okay, this is the simplest question. One word: passion. And this covers it all. If you have passion, this is the starting ground. If you have passion, and it's not true only in programming. It's true for every kind of every type of job. So passion.
Yeah. And this you just come into the chat. But I think it's quite relevant on this. Is there any relation between learning a language in real life, i.e. English to Romanian in our case, and to the ability to pick up languages from a dev perspective? I don't know what your opinion is on that, because obviously you're multilingual.
I'm not sure that I.
So is there from a dev perspective, is there a relation between learning a programming language and learning a spoken language?
Okay, I think the approach should be the same. First, the theoretical part, and then a lot of practice. So you cannot learn a new programming language just reading about it. You will have to practice it a lot. The learning comes from practice, but you need to know the grounds. You need to know the rules of the game you are going to play. So this is the same approach is for a spoken language. You need to know the rules.
Great. And just one more question, if I may. There's been a question on what would be your ideal interview process. So if you were to go through an interview process, what would be the ideal one for yourself?
The ideal one.
So I guess this is from without speaking for the questioner. I guess this might be: do you think that technical tests are useful in a process? Like, would you want those to be in the process?
I'm not a huge fan of technical tests. I don't think any developer is, but I prefer more another kind of approach, an open technical discussion with eventually with my future team, with all the members if it's possible, but a friendly one and related, maybe related to the actual job that I will do there with the technologies. And I will like that they will hire for attitude and not for what I've done in the past. Okay, it's important, the stack, but for me, the most important thing is the attitude, which implies passion. So you should hire me for my passion, not because I didn't use some Elasticsearch engine for at least 5 years, which I could learn in 3 months, I say. So this is the big gap today with the recruiting.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. So great questions from listeners today. Thanks, Darren, for running that. And amazing candor, and I think from Sylvia. So I hope you guys appreciate that. I think that's a really great insight into the mindset of some of the candidates you're going to be speaking to very likely in future. So I'm going to move us on. We've now got some recruiter insights. I think we're going back to you, Phil.
Cool. Yeah, so I think let's skip past the recruiter insights. These are things that you guys can obviously review when we send out the information. Bit of information on salary data, and then if we skip to the next slide, bit of information on kind of the in-demand languages for the various different areas. But I'm really keen to get on to the crowdsourced problems that we have. I'm conscious that we've not got too long left, so I think let's skip on to those and have a bit of a discussion about those to finish things off.
Super. So these are kind of day-to-day problems that we think recruits, some of our guys, the recruiters on the call today, might be having sort of types of scenarios or conversations they're having with their business partners on a daily basis. So let's kick off with the first one. Cool. So my hiring manager doesn't feel we have the time to upskill. So the brief is very tight. So I'll give you my take, and then I'll probably throw over to Darren again. I'm aware that time is quite strained. So I was actually chatting to Sylvia on this a little bit earlier, and just kind of getting an understanding of how long he thinks roughly, and this is an average, it would take a developer to learn a new skill. And it was actually quicker than I'd even thought. So if you're searching for, I don't know, let's say a C# developer that has ASP.NET, but you need .NET Core within the business, I think Sylvia mentioned that, to be honest, because you understand the language, you understand the syntax, typically it could take you between 1 and 2 months to learn that new framework. So if it's going to take you an extra 1 or 2 months to find that person with .NET Core, then, you know, if you've got someone who's passionate, who shows some good responsibilities and some good experience beforehand, then actually getting them in and upskilling them can take you just as long as waiting around for that next hire. And similarly, C# and Java, they have a very similar syntax in terms of the languages. So in terms of learning an entire new language, I think Sylvia said kind of up to 6 months. But if there are similarities, like there are between Java and C#, then that process can be cut down a lot quicker. So definitely something to bear in mind when you are discussing with your hiring manager and things like that, particularly if they're a developer themselves or previously were, get their take on that. How long would it take you to learn new languages? Great. In that case, is that something that we'd be open to, whether it's a new language or framework? Darren, I don't know if you had anything to add on that?
No, I think that was a good overview.
I have something to add.
Sure.
Okay, if I do not have expertise on that language, but if I'm a senior developer, and given the fact that you don't you do not have the time to upskill,
yeah,
you should take into consideration the fact that if I want to learn that and I'm an experienced developer, I will be more productive than I could be more productive than a developer who already know the language. Because if you have passion and want to learn something, maybe you will dive deeply than a regular senior developer who is doing this as a routine. So these kind of guys could be more productive and could bring more value to your company. You should explain this to the managers, because it's very important.
Absolutely, and you'll be researching the most modern version of that language, of course, as well. So someone might, they might know Node.js, but they might have learned it a few years ago. Whereas if you're learning it right now, then you are going to be learning the most up to date.
Exactly.
Absolutely, I think that's a very good point, Sylvia. Definitely. Great, Dale. If we can move on to the last one.
Phil, I think we're going to have to be swift with this one, with a couple of minutes remaining. But our final piece.
Lovely. So our current EVP for developers doesn't seem to resonate. How can we highlight things they're interested in? So Darren, I think you had quite an interesting take on this.
Yeah, so I guess it just comes from, and I'll make it swift, but there's a broadcasting company we work with historically, and they had struggled with the past with candidates being engaged with them and candidates accepting their offers. So what we helped them do and what we advised them to do was do almost like a day in the life video, where it's like 2 minutes walking around the office, looking at live code that people were doing, or looking at people that are coding, so that candidates that potentially would join can see that they're a tech first business. So I think the more you can sell the tech part of your business rather than just selling your business as a whole, and what is relevant to like sales and marketing, the better you're going to get engaged talent. Also, it also helps your EVP. To answer the question that's in chat, EVP is employer value proposition.
Yeah. And then, I think just a very good final point to me, and then we'll throw to Sylvia. I think learning and development is something that is huge. You know, if someone feels they can join your business and also improve their own skills, become a better developer through doing so, that's a huge pull. So that's not just obviously the immersive learning in the office and making sure that they're aware that they have good support, their manager will be there to teach them things and all of that sort of stuff, which is integral, but also access any learning and development access you have. So access to courses, access to even maybe work with a different team, or to work on their own project for half a day a week and things like that, which are things we see. Anything that's going to help the developer to kind of help themselves is something that is really gonna stand out to them. Sylvia, I don't know if there was any kind of final thoughts you would add on that.
I think I'm going to have to cut Sylvia because we are at time. Really sorry, guys, but fascinating session. That will have to wait to a future session. But guys, thanks for staying on till the end, guys. So see, vast majority of people stayed throughout the session. So hopefully that was helpful. And we'll see you again tomorrow. And the update will be coming out later today, all being well. Okay. Thanks. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.